Hi everyone, this is just a quick briefing for the on-site mentors in relation to the topic of problem solving and some of the changes for 2017. Doing it just by video would seem to be a quicker way of doing it than catching up with you individually, and I've just got some PowerPoints that I'll work through as well. I'm going to highlight the changes for 2017. I'm going to talk a little bit about the assessments for the topic, and also I'm going to review and remind you of what takes place on the topic day, which is this Thursday, the 2nd of February. Just on Thursday, the class time that you'll be in the seminar rooms is roughly 2:15, starting 2:15 to 3:45, and there'll be lunch in the instructor's room for 1 till 2. Just to highlight at the beginning that the on-site mentors are taking the day. So Emma, A and B, Stephen, C, D, Michael, E, F, I'm doing G, H, and Claire and Sarah are doing groups I and J. So please make sure that your schedule's free for Thursday afternoon for the teaching. Just a few things to highlight. In terms of materials, you will find that in your in-tray you would have received some hard copy workbook materials for problem solving. In that workbook you'll find some pink instructor's notes which will be useful for the training day and also for the assessments. Now the topic support materials for problem solving are online for the trainees, but I think we may have received them hard copy for this particular course for those taking it, for the mentors. So, but certainly for the trainees, the topic support materials are online, but they will also receive a copy of the workbook hard copy. So the main change for this particular topic is with regards to the client file letter of advice, and in particular the assessment. This will now be marked by each trainee's mentor rather than having myself mark all the on-site and online trainees. I'll give some more details about the letter of advice later on in the assessment, and that's probably one of the key changes for the 2017 course. Another change is that in the past we've given trainees a choice of which topic they want to write the letter of advice on. This time round we're not giving them the choice. It's a little bit easier if all the trainees in a particular group all have the same problem. Makes class discussion work a little bit better. So groups A to D are doing the Peter Brosnan problem, which is to do with a consumer law faulty jacket. All the problems are in the workbook materials, so let's have a look. I've got them here. So the Peter Brosnan problem starts at page 23. Groups E, F, I and J are doing Freddie McGrath. That's an Anzac Day problem, and that is on page number 16. And I do the Scott Scully problem for groups G and H. So please make a note of which problem you are doing in your groups. Continuing the changes, these are just more minor changes that you need to be aware of. All the preliminary exercises, all the topic work type exercises the trainees do, all these exercises are now going to be done online as quizzes, with answers and feedback automatically through the quiz. From our end, it's much easier to track these, and also from the marking, as opposed to in the past where it was much more difficult, much more labour intensive. So for practical legal research, they do 6 online activities. These are short answer questions. We've reduced them from 10, and they no longer have any choice. They must do all 6. All of these exercises are online. If you go to the problem solving page, you can view these at any time if you like. There are 5 online statutory interpretation questions. These replace the urgent repairs memo that the trainees have done in the past. So they don't do the urgent repairs memo. These have been replaced by the online activities. Similarly with problem analysis, we now have 3 online activities for those. These are short answer questions using the National Competency Standards problem solving loop and applying it to a fact scenario. These replace the 5-level analysis assessment. So no longer do the trainees have to hand in anything hard copy for the topic work exercises. These are all done online and hopefully speeds up the process of assessment. You don't really have to worry about those. I'm going to talk a little bit about this client file. Now this is due on the 3rd of March, and the trainees are going to submit this to you directly, a little bit like a client file letter. They'll be submitting one client letter of advice for the allocated problems, only 1,000 words, and this will be a first draft that they submit by the 3rd of March. They also have to submit what we call a performance criteria sheet or a brainstorming sheet. You'll see these in the workbook as well, the workbook materials towards the back. These are very brief, but we just want to make sure they go through a brainstorming process. Just note that although we call it a client file, it really isn't a file per se. They don't hand in a manila folder. They don't open a file opening sheet. They just simply hand in the letter of advice and a performance criteria sheet. They can just simply staple them together, just 2 pieces of paper if they really wanted to, but it's not a file in a manila folder or anything like that. Now, why are the mentors assessing the client file or this letter of advice? Well, one of the main reasons is to spread the workload amongst the different staff. Also, it's trying to reinforce each trainee's mentor as their main assessor rather than getting other staff members to assess their trainee work. But a key reason also is it provides an opportunity for each mentor to assess their trainee quite early in the course, and to reinforce learning in terms of drafting style. So rather than having another staff member commenting on the way a trainee drafts letters or does certain things, this is another opportunity for you to assess your own trainee early in the course. On the topic day, which is the 2nd of February, we ask that you discuss the client file letter of advice in class and facilitate group discussion and brainstorming of the problem. I'll talk about the class a little bit later on, but certainly on the topic day, there's an opportunity to talk about the client file problem. The trainees will be working on their letter of advice, their brainstorming sheet, as well as these other topic work exercises between the 2nd of February and the 3rd of March. That's when they work on the exercises and their letters. After the 3rd of March and not before, the mentors, once they receive the letter, you'll be providing some individual feedback on each trainee letter, a little bit like any first letter in a client file, pretty much the same. There are a range of suggested answers and some guides in the pink sheets in the workbook, so you can have a look at those. I'll also be providing some soft copy feedback suggestions. Now, once they've handed in the file on the 3rd of February, I'll be posting online some general feedback for each of the 3 problems for the trainees to have a look at. So they'll get individual feedback from you, and there'll be some general online feedback. Now, some versions of that online feedback are in the pink pages of the workbook if you want to have a look. Ideally, it'd be good for the letter to be assessed by you and returned with feedback within about 2 weeks of the trainees submitting their letter, which will be about the 17th of March. You're also asked to review the performance criteria sheet very briefly. Really, we're just making sure that they've done it. It's important that they do this feedback sheet. The next step after that, like in a usual client file, we want trainees to review the feedback given on the letter, your feedback, but also the general feedback, and then incorporate that feedback into a second and final version of the letter of advice. We will also be providing trainees with what we call a reflection sheet, so they can assess their first draft and comment on their own performance. So it's a self-evaluation form. They did this last year and it worked pretty well, so that's something that they'll also be handing back to you. The trainees then will submit their second draft of the letter with a reflection sheet to the mentor. Now, not 100% sure exactly the date for that, because it depends a little bit on when you get the feedback back to the trainee on their first draft. So I will have a talk to a few of you about that on Thursday, I think, in terms of dates. But it'll be probably at least a couple of weeks after the 17th of March, I'd be saying. And then, so the trainees then submit a second draft. You'll be reviewing the second draft relatively briefly, a little bit like how you review a final draft of a client file letter. No need really to make comments on it. You will then review very briefly the reflection sheet, mainly to make sure that they've done it, a bit of a ticker box exercise. Now, you'll be then completing an assessment sheet for the topic. Now, I'm in the process of developing this. I've used one in the past, but because you guys will be doing it this time, I've got to amend it slightly. So I've got a few soft copy versions. Mostly in that assessment sheet, the feedback that you provide in the first draft will probably be asking you to provide some feedback on that assessment sheet on their first draft, as well as briefly how they did on the second draft. There'll also be some boxes there for ticking that they've submitted the reflection and brainstorming sheet, and then the assessment sheet and work will be returned to the trainees and a copy given to the PDC office. So in some ways it's a little bit like the usual client file at that point. Now, so that's the letter of advice that they draft. Again, note the due date, I think it's 3rd of March. So what takes place on the topic day? So what's going on Thursday, the 2nd of February? Most of you have done this before, but some haven't. For those who haven't done it for a while, note that we no longer do the how to catch a moose or the NASA problems. We haven't used them for a couple of years now. Now, class or in the seminar rooms is only in the afternoon, 2:15 to 3:45 as an approximate guess. In the morning, trainees are self-instructed. They're asked to watch some online videos, review the materials, do some basic research on the Joshi-Bugner-Mikey problem, which will be discussed in class, do some research on their client file problem, which will also be discussed in class, and maybe start their other problem-solving exercises. If you look on page 2 of the workbook, which is the yellow page, you'll see a schedule of the things that trainees can do before and after class. So worthwhile reviewing that. Your role for Thursday really is to facilitate the group activities that take place between 2:15 and 3:45. There are 3 activities. There are some brain teasers, the Joshi-Bugner problem and the filework problem, and your role really is just to facilitate discussion on that. Mainly they'll just do it in their own small groups. So you just simply set them up and off they go. If anything, would like you to highlight that lawyers are problem solvers and problem solving is important in legal practice. On the day, basically work your way through the PowerPoint slides that I've provided. I've attached some, I think, to this email that I'm going to send this video with. They're slightly updated from the version that are in your workbook. There's no need really to have much knowledge of the topic support materials. The aim is simply to, if you just work your way through the PowerPoint slides, I encourage you, if anything, to look at the client file problem allocated to your group and the answers in the pink sheet, because they'll be useful for your discussion, and just be familiar with the brainstorming, the brain teaser at work or problems, and also the Joshi-Bugner problem. I encourage you to read pages 1 and 2 of the pink sheets in the workbook. They provide a suggested guide and time frame